What do you feel are some of the misconceptions around student learning? How does what is ultimately quite a positive thing turn dark? What are some of those things that might lead us astray with this concept?
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Yeah, I think that there's some misunderstanding as to what it means. I think what I've seen it spin into on the internet with comments and things about how we should approach is essentially that the student knows what they need and they need to guide the sessions. And again, I would say that's a flawed concept of what student-centered learning is about. And I see that a lot as the reason I mention it. What I would say is we need to look at that and maybe take that apart a little bit. So first thing I would say is I gained a lot from a session I saw with one of my mentors, Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a Vietnamese monk, and I was meditating, doing a retreat with him, and he has a question and answer session with people who come. It's everybody's welcome. You don't have to be Buddhist, anything. And he was working with a teacher, and the teacher was working in the inner schools of Chicago, and she was at her wit's end. Like, I want to help these people so much. I want this to be a better place. And I just can't, I have no energy and I'm tired all the time. And went on. And she paused and he looked and he said, leave. And I went, wait, he's lost it, right? This masterful person who has deep truths, there's no way that can be the answer. And then he went on to explain that if you are not centered yourself, if you are not grounded yourself, then you will not be able to help anyone. So then I take that to mean also that when you're engaging with students, you need to be grounded and centered yourself, which in a way is very much centered on you. So I think you can't take away the centering that is required of a teacher in order to create a space that is student-centered, so to speak. I think maybe even saying student-centered, it's really creating an environment that is equal and establishing the rules of engagement, which is the person has come to you for information in a topic that they're not well-versed, to try and meet the goals of that they're hoping to attain, some of which may be reasonable, some of which may not be. And so not only are you trying to create an environment where you are giving them tools to realize their potential, but you're also helping them, the word I use would be to become more discerning, more able to discern what is sustainable, effective, a lifelong endeavor, and what will not be possible for them.
I wonder whether a different version of this we see in the medical field now, where I've spoken with some medical healthcare professionals, family doctors, who have gone through the process, I guess, over the last 15 years or so, as Google has become more prevalent, and so you can Dr. Google your own symptoms, and more often than not that leads you down the pathway to, I'm dying from cancer. And so when we then take that to our doctor, the doctor then has to, it's almost like the doctor's just being asked to add their opinion to this, plethora of information, instead of us going to the doctor as the authority, not infallible, but certainly the end point where the doctor, we can really, we're going to the doctor as a final input of information to go, okay, well, we've done the tests and this, you're not dying from cancer, this is what it is. And doctors have shared with me that over the years, when Dr. Google became a thing, that they've gone through this process of needing to not, firstly, being argumentative, finding themselves in arguments with their patients, to now trying to work with their patients. So not necessarily discouraging the idea that they would Google, because everyone's going to have done it anyway. So how do we be patient-centered so that the patient brings their sense of information and knowledge, but ultimately they are still relying on the doctor to be that authoritative person and speak really positively into the space. It's kind of the same thing I feel like with our singers, is that so many of my students, particularly when they first arrive, well, how do we manage that? Firstly, as students, and secondly, as teachers, that, in one sense, positive tension.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in an environment, I'm going to call it maybe deep learning centered environment, instead of either teacher focused or student focused. It's about deep learning, which requires an inclusion of both entities and a sharing of energy in the room. I would say, I love your analogy too. I would say that in that environment, a healthy, respectful skepticism should be welcome. I don't think that needs to be discouraged, but again, healthy and respectful. And I do think that with the destructive part of student centering, like any thought you have is okay and any way you want to perceive is okay, that's not really true. That's not really true. And I think we all need to be shaped by our environment, and learn how to behave and be respectful of one another. So that's student to teacher and also teacher to student. It goes both ways. I've been with doctors that just say, I get where you're going, but here are the top reasons why I feel you should proceed this way. And then I go, well backed up. My students do the same thing. I say, I get your skepticism. I understand why you would be concerned. I understand that there's some other voices that said A, B, and C. And again, we don't even need to discuss whether they're right or not. That was their approach, but it didn't land with you. It made you confused. So now you're here. So I said, here's the reason why we're proceeding the way we're proceeding, and give it several weeks to a few months and you will see the difference. And if you don't, we need to revisit those topics.
But when I first started teaching, the moniker of student-centered learning wasn't a thing. I mean, conceptually, I'm sure it was there, but it wasn't really a thing. And I think in part because my upbringing within my vocal journey was very much master student. You definitely didn't question, the master, in part because I didn't have access. And you couldn't easily gain access to the information that the master teacher would have spent years, engaging in. The dark side to that was that it almost subjugated, had the potential to subjugate the student. And there was very much a power imbalance. And I think that the positive tilt, pendulum swing, if you will, of student-centered learning was to go, well, no, the student's not stupid. The student is experienced something, and they, at the end of the day, they are the authority on their own body. And so we need to bring that experience into the picture. It's almost like the pendulum swung too far, to the point now where we've diluted the position of the teacher to the point where, well, I'll take on what you're saying if I think it's, applicable. This is the student talking now,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the goal. And I think you're right in that assessment that it swung too far. But it's important to acknowledge what you just acknowledged is this is born of a very serious issue that existed. Sort of a bit of an oppressor model where the teacher would insist on certain things aggressively and not really include the student in on the understanding. A lot of that also was born of the inability to really have a true understanding. Decades ago, we didn't know what we know now from voice science and practical application. So So it's a newer thing. And I think that we need to honor that too, this, a lot of things are born out of situational, energies.
Yeah.
And so we need to identify them, name them as imbalanced, try to get them balanced. But if we don't talk about also, well, how far should this go?
Yeah.
So I think there are other things that are happening, including in the teaching thing we're talking about, where the pendulum swings, and it's like, oh wow, we have to be more mindful about what we're doing and how we correct, and take steps that will ensure balance, equality, equal access, and support for everyone. I think that's what it is. And same with our students. Our students all need to feel like they can be fully present in a lesson with us, and not that we're an oppressor holding them down, which requires a really high amount of energy on our part as the educator in that topic, to inform ourselves on a very deep level of the topic in which we're engaging, which has so many different components. And if we do that and we're responsible, then it's easy to be patient with a student, because we have an approach that's, based on some solid ground that we can invite them to start to understand over time.
Yeah.